Hi, this is Luann at Rockin Book Reviews, and I'm so happy to be here today with Catherine Forster. Catherine, I received your book and I'm really anxious to read it, and I was really intrigued by the title, Chasing Tarzan. How did you come up with that title?
I don't know. It's one of those things where it just came to me. Well, actually, it's kind of a funny story. I had, like most people, just buried my childhood. And then I was on a safari in Africa. And guess who kept popping up in the bush? Tarzan, my imaginary friend. And so it was sort of like he was chasing me. He would come back. And that's where the title came from.
What caused you to venture onto a safari?
It was a family trip. I had actually been to South Africa on a business trip. And for one of the weekends, I was there over a couple of weeks, they sent me on a safari, and it was just so magical that I really wanted to go with my family. So I went with my husband and my daughter, who was 11 at the time. No, she was 12 at the time. And a combination of her dealing with bullying, which I had at the same age and younger and older, and the fact that I was in Africa and Tarzan had been my playmate and confidant and rescuer.
I love to watch Tarzan movies.
I know. Well, that's what I did. I would lock myself in my parents' bedroom and watch Tarzan movies. That was my only safe space. And so that, sort of sparked the idea of the book. It's sort of
That's
like
interesting. Okay, well, while we're on the subject, tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up and how many siblings you had and so forth.
Well, I am the second of 8 children and the oldest daughter. So by the time I was 4, I was mommy's helper. 6, I was a diaper changing expert and housemaid. So there wasn't a whole lot of childhood after about the age of 6. And we moved around a lot. I lived in 5 cities by the time I was 7, in a lot of different places in Washington State, and then also in Augusta, Georgia. My dad he worked in retail, and they moved him from store to store. And then he was also he would flip houses. So we would also move houses within the same town. So I think I lived in maybe 13 houses by the time I was 7 as well.
That is crazy.
Yeah, very Catholic family, went to Catholic school, nuns, the whole bit, that sort of thing. Big, crazy family.
Is there a couple of memories you have from your childhood that has had an impact on your life that have made you the person you are today?
Well, I think, the biggest thing is being in a big family and being the oldest girl, you become the second mother. So it kind of takes away that, the freedom of childhood. I mean, I was happiest when we were in Augusta, Georgia, before all the weight of that, came to me, where we pretty much just ran wild outside, frogging and fishing and all that sort of thing. And then the second bit would be the move. When we moved from Augusta to Longview, that was a huge change. That's where the school bully was. And my brother also, who was older than I am, and we had been playmates, he became a bully too. So it's pretty relentless. There was no safe place except in my imaginary world.
And my mom was the second oldest. No, wait a minute. She was the third child and the oldest daughter of 9 kids. So she probably did the same type things you did.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. And it came down to the girls. I mean, it was the girls who were the ones that did stuff.
Oh, yeah. The boys are out doing their chore things and their whatever.
And their sports and their whatever. I had 6 brothers and my dad, and, beyond mowing the lawn and taking the garbage out, that was about it.
In the olden days, no, I remember my eldest brother, we had a small farm and he would do a lot of farm chores. My dad lost his job, and so we were in really straits there for a while. And my brother went to work on a very large farm, and the other brother, just older than me, he was lazy. And And he beat me up if I didn't do his chores and mine too.
Oh, well, yes, there's that as well. Yeah. No.
So I kind of understand that. And yes, I think so many of us have gone through the bullying stages.
Well, I think most people have probably been a bully at some time, have been bullied, have watched bullying, because it's so
I always
pervasive.
hated it.
Yeah.
Well, because I don't know, I just love people, and it just hurt me so bad that they, were so mean, and that, so it was really upsetting. But I can understand. I think a lot of us relate to that. And is there an answer? Do you have any answers? How to?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I mean, when I was going through bullying, it was just considered part of life. It'll toughen you up. You'll be stronger. The world is a tough up place,
Which
that
is a
sort
bunch
of
of bull.
Yes. And then after there were so many school shootings, and a lot of those shooters were bullied, that sort of created a huge movement, anti-bullying movements, zero tolerance in schools, laws, all kinds of stuff. But it hasn't changed. The bullying is still there. It's worse with the internet. Now, some of the stuff that's going on the internet, not just with kids, but with everybody, it has actually escalated the problem.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that is good is that the CDC has finally said that bullying is abuse. It's not acceptable. So that is good, so that children, if they have an advocate, can learn that they don't deserve it. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems with bullying, is that you believe it's you, that it's your fault, that there must be something wrong with you, otherwise why would you be targeted? And so you blame yourself, and you don't think it's abuse, you think it's part of life, and that that's your life. But what the studies have found is that if children have an advocate, if they are taught that they don't deserve it, that they are loved, their treatment should only be that which is generous and supportive. If they do have an advocate, they don't have to actually continue to suffer in adulthood like so many people who are bullied do. They struggle with depression, relationship issues, all kinds of stuff. That need not happen if there is an advocate, and that advocate can be a parent, it can be a teacher, it can even be a stranger or a friend, just so that the child knows that they are not deserving of this.
My mother did everything she could in high school to prevent, so much bullying and harassment. And the principal said he tried. I'm not sure he tried very hard. But she couldn't get much help. And it is very emotionally damaging.
It is.
Especially those formative years when everything seems so big, so mountainous.
And your sense of yourself is developing,
right,
from that inner voice. Because when the bullying is gone, I mean, like when I moved to a different school in high school, the bully came with me because it was now really trained. My own voice was a bigger bully now. And so yeah, it's a lifelong problem. It doesn't go away. It can be mediated with angels out there. Fortunately,
when I moved away, I had a wonderful group of friends, and it went away. But the damage was done, and
the damage was done.
Hard to overcome.
But they were giving you reassurance, that new group of friends, that you were worth more than that.
Yeah, it took a while.
Yeah, I don't know. That plus therapy and
that's what I think. So many people, well, it's better now, but when I was growing up, you just didn't seek therapy. It was not heard of. But I think it's important that, children who are bullied get therapy. And unfortunately, it's important that the bullies get therapy, because usually bullies are bullied by parents or other family members or caretakers. Yeah, it's interesting that in the studies that they found is that the children who are bullied relentlessly, I mean, pretty badly, it's a lifelong issue that they got to deal with relationships and depression and even suicide. Bullies who are bullied suffer the same, except they also have a higher tendency of being incarcerated. And bullies
that were not bullied just keep on bullying.
I was going to say, it even goes into adulthood,
It goes into adulthood.
in
You
the
see them,
workforce and other places.
yeah, you see them everywhere and on the internet.
It's sad. And I wish there was a
Uh,
magical way to make it go away. So,
I wish there was too.
okay, and you began your career as a microbiologist.
I did.
Why did you choose that career initially?
Well, when I was a kid, I was fascinated by what I couldn't see. So, I'd go fishing and then I'd dissect the fish, see what's going on inside. And the same with, a lot of little creatures and so on that I would find and keep, or that I'd find dead or whatever. And if it wasn't too dead, I'd figure out what was inside. And I also would draw. I was a big drawer and so on. But in my family, art was and paint and so on, but it wasn't considered a serious occupation. And I was the first one to go to college, and my parents wouldn't pay or support an art career. So I went into the sciences, which I loved as well. And then
you leave it.
And then I left it because I took it as far as I could, and I actually left it twice. The first time I got a master's in business and my MBA in London Business School, went to London, lived and worked there for a decade as a management consultant. And again, I was very interested in what you can't see, what's not on the surface. I was very interested in leadership and workforce behavior and connections with people, something, that's layered and as kind of a puzzle. And then I decided that, and I still always did art. I was more of a holiday painter when you had time. But I didn't want to regret not seeing if I had something to offer in that area. So I left and I did a master's in fine arts, and I've been a full-time artist ever since. And my art practice is somewhat like my career. It's varied because I paint, I make films, I write, and even my visual art practice is varied because I'll do painting, sculpture, film within installations, and so on. And it's because my work is theme-based, so there'll be a theme that I'm very interested in, and then I'll decide which media I want to use.
And that was another question, because I thought it's so varied, and most artists, they center in on a certain style of artwork and so forth, but yours is so varied, and even photography, and I mean, all sorts. I was looking at your website. There's no two alike.
Look, no, it's because it's very theme based, and then I decide what medium would best reach the viewer.
Okay, so while we're on the subject, you're also a curator.
I am, yes.
And it's amazing, all the art, and you've had all sorts of experience with your exhibits and so forth. Tell us a little about that part of your career life.
Well, I go by projects. That might be helpful. I'm doing a painting series at the moment, and it is about how our dislocation and lack of communication between the various groups out there. And even within groups, there's tribes with tribes and tribes within tribes. And so I've been using nature as a muse in this, because within nature, there are a lot of outliers. For example, in terms of gender identity, an orchid plant can have a male flower, a male and female flower, and a female flower on the same branch. And there are many, yes, and there are many creatures out there within the species that there's a huge variety. And nature seems to like that complexity. Does just fine with it. So I use that as a muse to create these very complex worlds. And then I create them within the computer, fabricated collages, and then I print them and I paint on top of them, so that there is this whole issue of what's true, what's real, what's a brush, what's a print, because I like that sort of play, trying to figure out the truth. And then I have 2 films that are doing quite well on the film festival awards in experimental film. And one deals with dementia, because my father dealt with dementia. And they're experimental films, so they are not a story from A to B with plots. There's just imagery that takes the viewer into a space. And this one is about dementia. It's about loss. It's about hope, and it's to reach both the individual that's suffering and the caregiver. The second one, Longing for a Shadow, is about isolation. And I did that one during lockdown. And it was mainly inspired by my mom, who wasn't able to visit with her children, her grandchildren, was already lonely because my dad died. So it was actually, and that one was done in collaboration with a dancer from New York. So she is in the piece, plus there's layering of other imageries, and zoetrope goes on in circles because there's like a never ending, like you're locked within it. So yeah, you can
And
see.
these have been short films, but you've done very well with them.
Yes, they're short films, they're short experimental films that I make for both the festival arena and for galleries where they'll be projected in a gallery installation.
And award-winning too.
Yeah, they're doing quite well. Very happy about
So
that.
do you have any aspirations to go into movie film?
No, I did do a documentary on amazing 90-year-old Southern belle that I met when I was doing something else in South Carolina, and I was just so inspired by her. I had to do a documentary on her. But that's about as far as I've done in terms of actual storytelling until I started writing.
And let's move on to that.
Chasing Tarzan, it actually started out by drawings. I started out drawing in my journal when we were in Africa, and then I came home and I figured all this was going on. It needed to be a project. But I didn't know what it was going to be, whether it was going to be an art project or I was going to play with the films that I'd done. And so I started drawing, and then I started adding prose, and pretty soon prose took over and it became story.
And tell us a little bit about the story.
The story takes place, it begins in Georgia when I'm about 7, and it's a really fun, magical place. It's almost like being in the jungle with Tarzan in real life. And then we move to Longview, and then everything changes. And that's when there is the relentless bullying, both at home, both at school. And I figure out a way to survive that, which is to enter my own space and also to make the bully invisible. So I basically just, looked past him, never did anything.
Yourself invisible.
That's exactly what happened. I was trying to make him invisible, but I made me invisible. Exactly right. And I also became like the perfect daughter and the perfect student and so on, because that was kind of my wall. That was my brick wall that, I was this strong that he couldn't get me. My brother couldn't get me. Nobody could get me. But then I realized that I was starting to be a bully too with my siblings. Just that anger, and I just had to come out somewhere. And then I really began to hate myself even more and decided that I had to escape, and just escaping inwardly wasn't going to change anything. So that's when I did an exchange program to New Zealand. And
oh, wonderful.
It was fabulous. I went from the nobody that was being picked on to a celebrity.
With loving people.
And with loving people. My family was pretty amazing. And I had all these friends and a boyfriend and the things that I just observed elsewhere. But I was still pretty walled off. I was trying on personas. I was the celebrity. I was the American. I was the this and the that, and I was a country girl. I sheared sheep. I had all these sort
and
of
you just absorbed it all.
But the real me, I thought it was all fake, and that I would be found out. So it was a different kind of fear that and my host mother, who is a very gregarious, really strong, pretty amazing woman, saw right through me and would not let me stay within my own shell. Bit by bit, she just plucked away, and I'd have to say she saved me. I mean, through her I learned who I was. Through her, I began to rethink other people, including my own mother. And, through my host mother, I discovered my own mother. So the story is about bullying, but it's also about mother-daughter relationship and all their insane complexity.
Yeah, I'm fortunate. I was the only girl, but my mother had a lot of health issues. So I was spoiled with love, but I was the caretaker. It was on me that at a very young age, like you said, I did things very young. And by the time I was 11, I had to take over. My mother was totally bedridden, and I had to take over everything, all the washing. And we had the wringer washers and all that fun stuff and hanging clothes on the line.
So there went your childhood.
Yeah. And so it was like, it was, and that made it bad within my head, because when my mom did get better, when I was a teenager, I knew everything. I didn't want to take I didn't want any boundaries. I didn't,
well, you were the parent. So why did that change?
And so it was, but anyhow, I became a brat. So when I was more or less a perfect daughter till I got to be a teenager, and then with them bullying started in, well, it's always been through elementary school, but it got really bad.
In high school? It got
high
worse?
School, yeah. But you amaze me. I think, because my parents were also in the generation that, well, you can go to college. It's better to just get married and have kids. So I knew I didn't have the support. And with the bullying, I had a total breakdown. And there went my GPA. Everything I knew my parents couldn't afford college and wouldn't be thrilled about it anyway. So that it's just like all my dreams went down the tubes. And it was a difficult time. And I just admire you so much for going forth and pushing forth and then getting all those degrees.
So what sparked your way out?
I got married. But then I had several miscarriages and didn't think I'd ever have children, but I ended up with 8. So
8. Oh my goodness. Wow.
But it was hard and it was difficult because I didn't start my relationship on a solid footing. And
it's hard too with that background. So
yeah. And so and then my husband was from a very abusive home.
Oh.
And from his mother, his father was the only thing that saved him. But so it was not an ideal start. We're still together.
Well, you must have both worked through your stuff together.
It wasn't easy, but we did it. Now I couldn't ask for a better husband. He's just a dream. We're back to you. My side of the story is not important. So what are your future goals?
Well, I'm writing another book. This one is a novel, and it takes place in 2 time frames, 1 week in 1953 and from 1912 to 1920. It's about a woman who is on the cusp of her 50th birthday, and she has been withdrawn, has sort of closed off based on trauma in her early life. And her son drops off his 6-year-old daughter, and the daughter has refused to speak, and they don't know why. And he's left her to be fixed by the grandparents. And it just topples her entire world, makes her go back and rethink her own childhood and secrets. There's a lot of secrets involved come to life.
This Chasing Tarzan was based on fact.
Yes.
So what was the difference in writing a novel?
Well, I am still learning that. It's a completely different. So my editors are pushing me, but this one, there's always a kernel that starts it, and this one was, if you read the book, when my parents moved from Georgia to Longview, there were 6 of us at the time. And they didn't have a house or anything yet. My dad hadn't really picked out which job he wanted. And so they farmed off us to relatives, and I stayed with my grandparents. And I stayed there quite a while. It was about a month. And I couldn't understand why they left me, because everybody was home before I got home. And my grandmother started telling me stories of when she was a flapper in the 1920s. And she'd never told anybody about that because that would have been considered
Not a good thing.
like a thing. And my grandpa didn't know she was a flapper. So it was, so that started this little kernel of secrets, grandmother and the granddaughter. And then the rest of it is all made up. But so it's kind of fun to be able to just take off, play, as opposed to being, you know, tightened down to trying to remember how things happened and get it right, and so different. And also having to dig so deep.
Well, that sounds wonderful. And I'm really anxious to read this, especially now that I've talked with you. And we have a big giveaway.
Yes, there is a $25 Barnes & Noble gift card plus an ebook. There are additional 5 ebooks, and there is a print, a signed print of one of the drawings. And whoever wins that one, they choose which one from the book they would like.
How wonderful. That sounds fantastic. Exciting. Okay. And do you have any final comments before we close?
I don't think so. It's been fun.
Okay. Well, it's been so interesting and delightful talking with you.
You
and
too.
I hope you can do this again with your new book.
Yes. Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great. I gotta finish the 5th draft.
Oh, it's getting close then.
It's getting there. It's getting there.
Okay. Okay. And we hope that all of you will search the universe through books. Bye now.